I remember that evening because nothing about it felt important. That sounds strange now, but at the time it was just another small, forgettable moment in a long stretch of ordinary days. I had the house to myself for the first time in a while. Not because of some dramatic reason or emergency. No argument, but because plans had overlapped in a way that left me alone until late. My parents were visiting relatives in another city. My younger brother had insisted on staying over at a friend's place, and I declined an invitation to go out because I was tired in the particular way that comes from too much routine. I liked being alone then. I still do, to a degree. That night, being alone felt like a reward. The house was familiar, down to the smallest details. The faint dip in the hallway floorboard outside my room. The way the living room light flickered for half a second before fully turning on. The smell of old wood and detergent that never quite went away. I moved through it confidently, barefoot, turning lights on only where I needed them. There was no fear in me, not even a trace. I made myself dinner, something simple. Reheated leftovers and ate standing at the kitchen counter while scrolling on my phone. The ceiling fan hummed above me, steady and low. Outside, the neighborhood sounded exactly as it always did in the early evening. Distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the street, someone's television bleeding laughter through an open window. Everything felt balanced, predictable. After eating, I washed my plate and set it in the rack, then walked through the house doing the small rituals I always did when I knew I'd be up late alone. I locked the front door, checked the back door, pulled the curtains closed. I didn't do these things out of fear. They were habits, movements, learned over years. The locks clicked into place with familiar resistance. The curtains slid smoothly along their rods. I remember thinking, briefly, how quiet the house felt once everything was shut. But it wasn't an unsettling thought. It was comfortable, like the quiet that settles after a storm or late at night when everyone else is asleep. I settled into the living room with a blanket, turned on the TV, and let some background show play while I half watched, half scrolled. Time passed in an unremarkable way. Episodes blurred together. My phone buzzed once with a message from my mother asking if I'd eaten. I replied yes, added a heart, and put the phone face down on the couch beside me. That was the last normal moment, though I wouldn't recognize it as such until much later. The first thing that felt off was the silence. Not the absence of noise I was used to quiet, but the way it arrived. One moment, the TV was playing. The ceiling fan was turning. The house felt alive in its usual background way. Then there was a brief, almost imperceptible shift. Like the air had thickened, the TV volume dipped. At first, I thought it was part of the show, a dramatic pause or a transition. I glanced up, waiting for it to return to normal. It didn't. The voices stayed low, muffled, as if the sound were being pushed through a wall. I reached for the remote and turned the volume up a notch. Nothing changed. I turned it up again. Still nothing. The display showed the volume increasing, but the sound remained wrong distant, thin. That should have annoyed me more than it did. Instead, I felt a mild confusion, followed by the calm assumption that something was glitching. Electronics do that. It wasn't worth overthinking. I muted the TV and unmuted it. The sound snapped back to normal. Immediately, I laughed under my breath, a short, quiet exhale, and shook my head at myself. For a second, I felt faintly embarrassed, like I'd almost reacted to something that didn't deserve it. I went back to watching. 10 minutes later, the ceiling fan slowed. Not gradually, like it was losing power, but unevenly. The blades stuttered, hesitated, then continued turning. The light attached to it flickered once. This time, I did feel a prickle of irritation. I looked up, squinting, and waited. The fan steadied. The light stayed on. Get it together, I muttered, though I wasn't sure if I meant to fan or myself. The house had old wiring. That explanation fit neatly into place, and I accepted it without resistance. I wish I could say the fear started then, but it didn't. What started then was awareness. I became conscious of the space around me in a way I hadn't been before. The living room felt larger, emptier. The hallway leading to the bedrooms looked darker than usual, even though the same lights were on. Shadows seemed to stretch just a little farther. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, Not because I was cold, but because it felt grounding. Something solid to hold on to. A sound came from the kitchen. It was small. So small that I almost ignored it. A soft clink, like ceramic touching metal. My first thought was the dish rag. Plates shift when they dry. Cups settle. I'd heard that sound 100 times before. I told myself this without hesitation. Still, I listened. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No additional noise. Just the hum of the fan. The low murmur of the TV. I waited longer than necessary. My eyes fixed on the dark opening of the hallway. My heart rate picked up slightly, then settled when nothing happened. "You're alone," I reminded myself. "You locked the doors." The thought reassured me. I'd been careful, responsible. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, flicking on the light even though it was already partially lit from the living room. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The plate sat in the rack, water pooled beneath it. No movement, no sign of anything out of place. I lingered there, arms crossed, scanning the room with a critical eye, as if daring something to reveal itself. Nothing did. I turned the light off and went back to the couch. That should have been the end of it, but the house didn't return to normal. It stayed in a slightly wrong state, like a picture hung just a fraction crooked. I couldn't have said what was different if you'd asked me. Only that my body felt it before my mind did. Minutes passed, then more. The TV show ended, and the streaming service asked if I wanted to continue watching. The silence during that pause felt heavier than before, like it pressed against my ears. I clicked yes. As the next episode loaded, I heard something above me. The sound was slow and deliberate, a creak, followed by another, spaced evenly apart. Footsteps. My stomach tightened immediately, even as my mind rushed to explain it away. The house had a second floor. Old wood expands and contracts, temperature changes, cause noise. I'd lived here long enough to know the difference between random creaks and movement. Though this was rhythmic. Measured, I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped. I sat very still, my fingers gripping the remote harder than necessary. My breath felt loud in my chest. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not to let imagination take over. If someone were upstairs, I would have heard more doors, furniture, something unmistakable. The silence stretched. I waited for the footsteps to resume. They didn't they. Finally, I stood, my legs stiff, and called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the empty house, the word echoing faintly off the walls. I immediately regretted speaking, not because I expected an answer, but because the sound of my own voice reminded me how alone I was. No response. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself I was tired. I told myself this was exactly how people scared themselves for no reason. Still, I didn't sit back down. I walked to the base of the stairs and looked up. The upstairs hallway was dark, the shadows deep and layered. I strained to hear anything, but it was only the faint hum of electricity and the distant sound of a car passing outside. "I'm just checking," I said softly, to no one. I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I returned to the living room and sat, this time closer to the edge of the couch, my body angled toward the hallway. I didn't turn the TV back on. The quiet felt dangerous now, but noise felt worse, like it would make me careless. I picked up my phone and texted my brother a joke about the house making weird noises. He didn't respond. I told myself he was busy. Another sound came, this time from behind me, a soft, dragging noise near the back door. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked at once, as if something ancient had taken over. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. I listened so hard my ears hurt. The sound came again, slow and careful, like something being pulled across the floor. I thought of the back door. I thought of the lock. I had checked it. I was sure I had. The noise stopped. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. Time lost its shape. Finally, I forced myself to move. Very slowly, I turned my head. The back door was closed. The curtains hung still. The floor was empty. I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. My hands were shaking now, and I couldn't stop them. "You're panicking," I told myself. "This is what happens when you're alone too long." I stood and walked toward the door, every step cautious. I checked the lock, it was secure. I checked it again. Justo bisur. Something caught my eye then, a faint smear on the floor near the door. Long and uneven, like something had been dragged but it could have been there before. A mark I'd never noticed. Dust and shadows play tricks in low light. I didn't want to look at it too closely. I backed away and turned off the kitchen light, plunging the back of the house into darkness. That's when I heard breathing. Not mine. It was shallow, controlled, coming from somewhere close. 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 I dropped to the floor without thinking, crawling behind the couch as quietly as I could. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would give me away. I pressed myself flat against the carpet, the fibers rough against my cheek, and waited. The breathing continued. I couldn't see anything from where I was, only the underside of the couch and a sliver of shadow beyond it. My phone was in my hand, the screen dark. I didn't dare turn it on. I tried to count my breaths. I lost track almost immediately. Something moved. A shift of weight, a soft footstep. It crossed the living room slowly, deliberately, as if whoever or whatever was there was taking care not to make noise. I squeezed my eyes shut, every sense screaming. The footsteps stopped near the couch. The breathing was right there now, above me. I bit down on my sleeve to keep from making a sound. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't afford any movement. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then the footsteps moved away, toward the hallway. I stayed hidden long after the sound faded, my body aching from tension. I didn't move until the silence felt absolute again. Even then, I didn't feel safe. I don't know how long I waited before the front door opened. I heard the lock turn. I heard familiar voices. Light flooded the living room. I crawled out from behind the couch, shaking, sobbing, trying to explain what had happened in broken fragments. They searched the house. They found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of anyone else. They told me I'd imagined Italiano. I told myself the same thing, eventually. But sometimes, when I'm alone now, I still hear breathing where there shouldn't be any. And I never sit with my back to an open room anymore. Because I know what it feels like to be watched and not seen. And I know how easy it is to convince yourself you're safe when you're not.